Okay, so from the chat window, I see a couple of questions there. So the first one, um, Mohammed had asked about for assignment number 3 about the output. And I stated in there that the output, I do need to have that written to the console. If you want to write it to the console and to a file, that is good as well. And Kyle had a question about how many days, hours will be given for exam number 3. And exam number 3 is going to be ready for you to start on 8 o'clock in the morning, 0800 on Friday, and you have until 0800 on the following Monday to have completed that. I do have a timer running, so you have 2 hours. Actually, I think I opened it up to 2.5 hours for you to complete that exam. Now, I caution you that if you start the exam at, say, 7 a.m., and you think you have 2 hours or 2.5 hours to complete it, you are wrong, because it will be done at 0800, regardless of what time you started. So you want to plan accordingly. Okay, and Mikhail had another question regarding how is exam 3 going to be structured? And it's pretty much like we talked about in class and talked about, um, yeah, it was talked about in class and then the study guide as well. So you're going to have a mixture of questions where you're going to be completing responses, completing code, making changes to code, or writing code. What we mean by code, it could be, in this case, grammars, since that's what we were studying in chapter 5, BNF, which is a language for a grammar. It could be things like quads, and likewise, it could be Lex code. Now, I didn't include Yak. We will focus on Lex as far as what you would be uh, asked about in the exam. So that's pretty much it. Now, one of the questions, because there's another question that sometimes I ask about the parsed trees or stacks, right? So we studied trees and stacks, and we studied how grammars could accept and classify tokens using either a grammar that is based upon an LL or LR grammar, in which case it will either be doing top down or bottom up, which means you're going to do a tree or a stack. Now, that particular case, that is really hard to do in the type of boxes that they give us to work with in the test feature. So for that particular one, if I asked a question like that, you would need to either write that out by hand on a piece of paper and scan it, or make a picture of it with your cameras or on your phones, or you would need to scan it and get it uploaded to your computer so you could then upload that to the question for that particular question. That's the only kind of question I really didn't see a good way around using the tools that are built into the test mechanism. So if I do ask a question like that, you would then need to be prepared to take a picture, scan, get the file on your computer that you're using so that you could then upload that as the answer. And I think you're all familiar with that from other classes and how to do that. You've had, I guess in some cases, whole exams that were done that way. But if I do ask that kind of question, that's the only tool that I see for us that we can use to answer that one with. Other questions? Great questions. Saming Chang just asked, so do we need a lockdown browser or not for exam number 3? And I decided to not go with the lockdown browser for exam number 3. So Trevor asked a question, but I'm not really sure what he's asking. He wants to remove something from his computer. If you're referring to the lockdown browser, as far as this class is concerned, you may remove the lockdown browser for this class. Couldn't resist. I get it. It was very frustrating for you. I appreciate you walking me through it. It was the first time I'd seen it and experienced it, and I had to check it out. I do appreciate your patience with it, but I will not be using that, no. So are there questions? Saming is asking about little code questions, and the answer to that is, as I described earlier, I'll walk through it again so he can understand. Probably should go ahead and put up the study guide, because we're following the study guide. Spring Sam 3 prep. Okay. Sam 3 prep. Where did I put you? There we go. Okay, so when you go through these questions, you'll see that in chapter 5, we talked about grammars, and we talked about like BNF grammars, and we talked about parse trees and stacks. So all of those tools that you have are kind of like code. You're working with code in those tools. So I would expect you to work with those tools on sample grammars or sample input expressions, and being able to use those tools to be able to solve problems with. Okay, likewise, the things that we talked about in regards with being able to demonstrate the parse trees, excuse me, the trees that you use for parsing, or the stacks that you use for parsing is possible. The other things would be generating the quads, right, that you would use to implement certain, the code when you're in that phase of the compiler with. You should be able to use quads as well. So all of these topics that we talked about in here, and the tools that we used in here, you should be able to work with those. Yes, and that's what we're talking about. As far as a specific code example would be like the Lex input file. The Lex input file, I would expect you to be able to work with one of those and answer a problem with that. And Austin is asking a question about the time for the exam, and that is correct. 0800, that is 8 a.m. this Friday is when it'll be available for you to start. You're taking exam number 3. It will close at 0800, that is 8 a.m. that following Monday. So Friday the 8th at 0800, 8 a.m. through Monday the 11th at 0800, 8 a.m. is when the exam will be open for you. And you'll have 2.5 hours to complete it once you start it. Unless, of course, you wait too late and you're up against that Monday 8 a.m. cutoff. Thank you. I'm trying to work with you here. I understand this is very trying times for all of you, and you have lots of stuff being thrown at you by all of your classes as they try to find out how to make this work. I want to make sure that we're testing your ability on the topic, on the technical issues in this topic that you've been studying, and not whether or not you can get around modified schedules to accommodate limited testing resources using computing resources that you may or may not even have access to all the time. Likewise, a good study time at home to be able to answer the problems without too many distractions. I totally get that. So I want to work with you, and I appreciate you accommodating that. As you can see here too, some additional study, let me put my pointer up here, additional study things to focus on, right? One would be how we generated addresses, the algorithm for being able to generate addresses for complex data structures. You know, you should be able to do that as well. Structure of the compiler, talked about most of these. Yeah. One thing we didn't talk about is there is a table in the textbook. I should have looked that up before we started tonight. There's a table in the textbook which actually is the operator precedence order table, which is a fantastic tool to use when you're trying to understand how to work with precedence, because it gives you the priorities. It says, given these symbols, how are they in relative priority to these other symbols? And it's a fantastic table. I should have put that in here as a study aid. So I'll look that up here while we're talking and asking questions and answers here, and provide that to you, because I highly recommend that table, which you hopefully came across in your studies anyway. So Saming asked a question, another question, and Saming is asking how many points is the final? It's 50 points, just like I have posted in the syllabus, and the other exams are each 50 points. The assignments 1 and 3 are 26 as advertised. The only thing I changed was I added additional points for assignment number 2, and I did that for a variety of different reasons. And I know that helps everybody because everybody did really well on assignment number 2. I found the table. So figure 511, 5.11 is the precedence matrix for the grammar that was given for our examples here. So that table is a very good read to help you understand how we can specify precedence of operations in different ways. This tabular form is excellent because you can see every one of the legal operators inside of this particular language, which was Pascal, that you can see how it relates to each of the other operators. Specifically, you can say, like the equal sign says, hey, these are equals. Then that means if you're using a left or right grammar, then the left side would the one on the left would have higher priority than the one on the right. But if you were using an LL, it'd just be the opposite. Okay, but the less than operator, greater than operator makes those very clear. And then there's those that are not specified. And if they're not specified, then there is no precedence. You're just doing it in the grammar order that was specified. If it's left to left or left to right, then that is the precedence. So it's a fantastic tool to help you understand precedence operators, precedence of operators and how to evaluate them. Okay, so Jacob asked the question, so point values are representative of value versus total and no further weighting? So yes, all of the points that are possible on each of the questions are those absolute values, okay? You can have up to n number of points, and they're specified on each of the questions that you will see and that you had seen on the previous as well. I identified how many points each question was worth, and then you can earn up to that many points on that question. No weighting. Okay, other questions? So Saming is asking for clarification on the exam. And the answer is, in most cases, once you start the exam, you only have 2 hours to complete it. The only time that's different is if you start the exam, say at 6 a.m. on Monday, the 11th, you have at that point exactly 2 hours, but in subsequent, if you subsequent later starts, you're going to have less than 2 hours. So you do not want to start this any later than 6 a.m. on Monday, the 11th. All right, so an additional question about possibly getting extra time for taking for taking this exam, given that one of the questions might include uploading an image, whether it's a picture you had to take and upload to your computer or scan from a scanner to get to your machine. The comment was, other class that took some time and had to forego finishing the exam questions so I could do the upload and submit this in time. So I just realized when I was answering Siming's question that I stated 2 hours. The difference here is that I've actually set this already to 2.5 hours because I wanted to accommodate that. And having said that, I believe you should be able to complete this exam in 1.5 hours. So 2.5 hours should be plenty of time for you to complete the exam, as well as creating and uploading the answer to a question should I ask a question like that. Again, my goal here is not so much working around the technology and the actual things that you have to work with to do these exams, more so on being able to understand content. So Ethan asks a question, when we submit that question, and again, I caveat it with, if I ask a question like that, then that's the format. But if we do ask a question that requires you to upload a document, do I prefer it as a PDF? And the answer is PDF is the most universally accepted formatted file, and it's the one most guaranteed that you can recognize it with and be able to work with it. However, I do know that we can work with GIFs and JPEGs and PNGs in addition to PDF and Microsoft Word. So we can take, although you might not, if it's a question like that, you might not want it as a Microsoft Word. You might prefer it to be something else, but you're probably looking at taking photos anyway. And so the question is, I'll take either GIF, JPEG, PNG, or PDF. Any of those formats are sure to be able to get through the system and read by us. Kyle, thank you for that recommendation. If you're not looking at the chat window, his recommendation is, hey, if you don't have a scanner or a scanning app on your phone, recommends Office Lens for your mobile device since it generates PDFs really easy. Ethan says Genius Scan works as well. Of course, the iUniverse of Things has notes, or Notepad, which allows you to do the same thing there. There's a number of apps that are out there. Appreciate the recommendations here. So again, I know you're time limited. You've got all these other classes and you're finishing up assignments and you're finishing up studies and you're preparing for finals and you're taking finals and all that's a lot of activity here. So helping each other out like this is fantastic. Thank you. And as in previous lectures, I record the stuff we are presenting, the vocal discussion here, as well as the chat window, which is in a separate file, so that all of this content is available for your review. So what we're doing this week then is tonight, like we started off, we're going to be here asking and answering questions. Wednesday night, I will do the same thing. I will fire this up, and you're welcome to join in and ask questions or see what other questions other students have. And we'll just hang around here for a while. If we exhaust the questions, we'll go ahead and close up. But I'll go ahead and open up a discussion board on the website so that you don't have to wait until Wednesday. Or you can wait until Wednesday and we'll open this up and go through additional questions that you may have. And Jackie asked the question, would you say the study guide covers everything the final could ask, or is there anything else you could recommend to study? Am I going to sneak something in on you and try to get, no, I don't do that. It's the material that's covered there. And it's not going to be those exact questions, and I might have different aspects of the topic that I want to focus the question on, but it's going to be on those topics. And that's why I'm listing, as you can see there, those exact chapters that I'm interested in you covering, and then the sample questions are focused on the most important topics there that I'm most likely going to be asking the questions on. So I'm not going to be trying to find something that I can just try to smell you over. That is not education. Marina asked a question, and it looks like Raul answered it. Except the 10th is Sunday. The 11th is Monday, until you have until 8 a.m. on the 11th. That's okay. I appreciate you trying to answer the question. That's great. Saming's asking the hard question. When is the grade for assignment 3? I don't know. I think you have to complete it first. So we're getting to it fairly quickly. It's going to be straight. This one's going to be straightforward for us to grade. So I don't anticipate this one taking too long. I'm hopeful we'll have it done by the weekend. Okay, I just created a new discussion thread. So if you're in Blackboard, or when you go to Blackboard and you go down to discussions, you'll see a discussion thread there for exam number 3. So you are welcome to use that as you wish, as that helps. Hi, Kane, let's take that discussion offline. Let's address that after we're done with the open lecture here. I need to find out more. As a reminder to everybody too, when you're writing questions to me, it's best, unless of course you're asking stuff that's specific that you need from me. But if it's questions about topics in class and stuff like that, be sure to include our grading assistant, Bagashri. And a lot of times she can help answer things before I get to them, given my day job. And Jacob asked a question. Will Eterus ever support regex? So I heard from three students that the three students anyway that contacted me had written their assignment number 3 with a newer version of the compiler, which includes newer libraries and packages than what's available on Eterus, which includes some regex package, and only to find at a late date that when they went to upload it to Eterus that it wouldn't compile and run. And the answer to that is yes, they will be upgrading the compilers on Eterus, but they do so in a very controlled fashion because of the number of courses that are ongoing that require a specific version to be there, and they coordinate when they do the upgrades to be the least disruptive to those classes that are already in session or already planned for the following semester. So, and by the way, this is not unusual for real world application as well. We frequently will not use the most recent. Sometimes we do, and it's great when we do, but sometimes we don't use the most recent version of a number of these tools, compilers, IDEs, library packages, add-ins, and things like that. We don't always use the latest version because when we start a phase of a project, we lock down those versions because we know if the compatibility issues has been tested prior to going into development. And so that's not uncommon for you need to be working with versions that aren't always the latest that are available. Or sometimes there's a later version available, there's a known flaw or defect in it, preventing the compiler for generating the kinds of results that the project is dependent upon. So there's a number of reasons that go into locking down at certain times these tool sets. So one of the things that is always going to be incumbent upon you as a student, but also out there in the real world, is to always maintain awareness of what versions of each of these tools the team is allowed to use. Regardless of what your preference is, you need to understand that and work within that framework. Because if you go outside of that framework, you might find a situation where you've been developing against some package that doesn't exist and it's causing you some unplanned work as a result of that. So always go and look at your target environment or your dev environment before you start working and understand what that means and be able to work with the right tools. Yes, I am sorry that a few of you started off and worked with a newer version. We did make it clear in the specification for assignment number 3 that it had to compile on Eterus, and there's a website that's posted that provides a list of all of the tools and the versions of the tools that are on there. And it's unfortunate that that wasn't clearly understood and you did extra work as a result, especially at this time of the semester. But we can only test this on Eterus, and so we need to work on that version. Other questions? Okay, I see students dropping off, so I think we will go ahead and wrap this up for tonight then. And like I said, either I would recommend using the discussion board primarily, but you can always still send me email or we can wait for discussions on Wednesday. All right. So have a good evening, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you on Wednesday.